The Crystal Charter, Daughter of the Red Seal. Chapter 24. Wistful laughter echoed from the kitchen. Maebe knew certainly would be in there, making a nuisance of herself as usual. She stalked the noise and flowed into the room like a predator, leaning against the doorframe and looking down her nose. Certainly sat smiling with Sarah. Maebe's eyes bored into them, as intent possessed her actions. "Excuse me, Sarah. I'd like a word with Cert in private, if you wouldn't mind." Her voice rang hollow, like it came from another body. The rounded cook could have been Certainly's grandmother. They shared the same heavy bosom. Sarah's dark hair had turned mostly silver, and her brown eyes had more of a spark of life than Certainly's. She curtsied deep, in the presence of a mistress who hadn't ventured to the kitchens since she was a child. "Yes, Miss Sumine, immediately. I'll be in the servants' hall. I can keep the others from coming in, if it pleases you." She dipped her head again, wringing her hands. Maebe offered a sweet smile through glassy eyes. "That would be wonderful, Sarah. I won't be long. Please enjoy some of the delicious food that you prepared today." Confusion, rooted in her mistress's strange behaviour, led the older woman to cast a nervous glance at Certainly, before she bowed deeply and vanished backwards through the door. "Maybe No. Don't worry. I owe you an apology. I've come here," her hands gestured to the room around them, "to show you how sorry I am. You were the one who prepared the extra staff today, yes? How brilliant. The day would have been a failure without them. I thought we could have a drink and a chat. It's no secret that a lot has happened recently for both of us, and I think if we're going to live together, we should at least be on speaking terms." Her empty stare unsettled Certainly. "Okay, that does sound nice," she responded with a nervous whisper and chewed her unsmiling lip. "Look, I can even make tea for us myself. I'm more than just a spoilt merchant's daughter." Maybe had tried to make it a joke, but she heard the desolate tone of her voice. She was too distracted by the burning weight of power in her pocket. She scrutinized the room, trying to find a kettle to fill with water, and noticed Certainly pointing to one on the wall with a pained expression. Hanging among pans of every size was the metal kettle. She unhooked it and filled it with water from a crystal over the drain. A chunk of green barite, tapped into a spring in the north of the capital, opened to a flow of fresh water, a useful invention from the Guild that was much more common in Clest, but few could afford the maintenance. She placed the heavy kettle on the crystal-powered stove and went back to the high-rise table and the stool that Sarah had been perched at. Fingers brushed cautiously over the lump in her pocket. How would it work? Maybe she would lose her memory of the last year. That would be useful, but unlikely. If it did, though, would she just leave? Would she just go to her family? The witch had placed the era crystal inside it. It changed colour with the influence of the crystal. Instantly, her mind reneged the fantasies in. She'd never seen a potion treated with external magic. What would happen to it? What if she lost all of her memories? What if it corrupted the potion? Maybe breathed through her nose. "It's fine. It will just be a little stronger than usual. Like the era crystals are stronger than other crystals. Are you okay?" Certainly ventured, thumbs circling each other in her lap. "I'm fine," Maebe snapped. She hadn't realized her stare had been fixed on the shy woman, shrinking further into the kitchen stool with every second that passed. "You know, you don't have to lie. No one expects you to be fine. Not after today. You seem a little distant, maybe." Guilt was a hair's width away from wrecking her. She had forgotten her father for just a second. Her breath snagged. How could she have been so engulfed in what she was about to do? The guilt extended to how her father would react to maybe poisoning his wife. I've never lost a parent. I can't imagine how bad you must be feeling, Certainly continued. I'm so glad you want to talk, though. She smiled. An infuriating, pitying smile that lit up her face, and her back straightened a degree. Maebe's fingers walked over the lump in her pocket, and her eyes glazed over again. The kettle began whistling. Her mind was made up. She poured the steaming water into a teapot, brewing the most scented tea she could find, honey root with fire ginger. The hot, sweet steam filled her nostrils, and she knew with certainty it would cover any smell or taste the potion might have. She found 2 ornate teacups whilst it was brewing. A glance at Certainly showed her drawing invisible doodles on the table with her fingers, holding on to that pitying smile, even with sad eyes. Maebe fished the vial from her pocket, fumbling to pull the stopper out of the end of the tiny bottle. It pulled free with a small popping sound, and Maebe swiveled her head to see if Certainly had heard. She had stopped drawing invisible pictures to tap her fingers on the surface and stare into the distance. A shudder ran through Maebe as she tipped the contents into the bottom of the delicate teacup. Tiny spring trees wrapped around the edge. Painted pink petals swirled around the rim. Apprehension twisted her guts to ribbons, but didn't stay her hand as she tipped the steaming tea into the cup, covering the unnatural shine of the liquid with the brown mask of tea. Here you are. She dropped the tray down in front of Certainly, and her arms began shaking. Are you sure you're all right? No one would think it amiss if you went to lay down. I know you leave tomorrow, but I'm fine. Honestly, I just need a drink. She had to drag her eyes away from Certainly, and struggled to push the teacup towards her. Her hands had clammed up, and she felt her face burning the same way. I used honey root, so we shouldn't need anything sweeter, but do you want anything anyway? She stuttered. Why am I nervous? It's not right. I'm not murdering anybody, she thought. Her mind argued with itself. She could feel the sweat beading on her forehead, and she clasped her shaking hands together. Her body was protesting. No, thanks. The beautiful cup was raised to Certainly's lips, and Maebe felt her attention focus too sharply on the action. A starving mountain cat, seeing the minute movement of a rock rat that it would hunt all the way to the summit if it had to. This is wrong. She lowered her carnivorous stare to her own cup, waiting for something to happen, absorbed by the brown liquid steaming in her face. The sweet smell of honey root luring her to taste her own tea. Her hand shook the teacup, rattling it against the saucer before she could steady herself. She didn't want to drink honey root tea, not so late at night, and definitely not in the kitchen. Maebe hated going down into the kitchen. It wasn't appropriate for her to be there. She should have taken a soothing tea in her rooms. Today must have shaken me a bit too much to venture down here, she thought, and sighed out. Her hand steadied. Sweat dripped from her head onto the table. She pulled out her handkerchief and dabbed at it. Do I have a fever? Miss Sumine, would you like me to get one of the girls to take your tea upstairs for you? The quiet voice of a mousy girl from the door. Lucette was Sarah's helper. She must have come to get something from the kitchen. I'm not feeling too well, Lucette. Could you have this sent to my room and tell Elsie to run a bath for me? After that, I told Sarah to enjoy the food at the servants' hall. You can go and join her. Today has been long for everyone. Have a rest, she sighed. The slim young girl bowed and slipped past Maebe on the stool, grabbing a tray and whisking the teapot out of the room. Maebe hated the kitchen. Dark stone walls, a trove of practical crystals and utensils. This was a respectable manor, and she had her own role as owner to sustain. When her mother died, her father had told her, "Grief makes you do strange things." A wash of sadness filled her, but she nodded to herself in agreement with his distant wisdom. Maebe hopped off the stool to go to her bedroom. Her thin house slipper soaked up warm water splashed across the floor. Glancing down, she saw tea that she must have spilled during her dizzy spell. "That's why you get servants to do it," she muttered to herself. There was a single, dainty teacup on the floor, hiding from the shadows in the gem lights. Tilted and resting on its side, a small puddle surrounding it. It matched the one on the tray Lucette had cleared from the room. An unvoiced question fluttered around her brain. Why did you get 2 cups? Everyone went home, didn't they? She scooped it up by its dainty ring handle, painted to look like a twisted branch, and placed it on the top of the table. A glinting light snatched her focus back to the middle of the cup. Resting in the last drops of sweet-smelling tea sat a crystal. Dark. The kitchen was filled with regularly used magic. She assumed it was a near-spent gem of practical use. She plucked it out, holding it up to the light, where she noted that there were no shades of blue or green or red glinting in the depths of the stone. The crystal was opaque, black, tainted and spent. Her vision went as black as the crystal, which she clutched in her bloodless hand.